Alright boys, welcome back to another video. Swaggy here. Today we're talking about the Las Vegas Raiders. They moved to 2-2 on the season. To me, this was a must-win game. You're coming off of a 2-score loss to the Carolina Panthers in your own building. Absolutely embarrassing, inexcusable, pathetic. There was a business decision made for Jack Jones. He ended up coming off of the bench in this game. But against Cleveland, the Raiders found a way to win 20-16. And don't get me wrong, this wasn't the prettiest game in the world by any means. But the coaching staff did what they were supposed to, and they had a game plan, they made adjustments, and the Raiders walked out of there with a win. I really couldn't care less how the Raiders win games as long as they're winning, and they won this game. So let's talk about how they did it. So first and foremost, the most important thing that the Raiders did was get the ball into their receivers' hands, but not throwing, but by rushing. DJ Turner, 1 for 18 and a touchdown. Looking at Brock Bowers, 1 for 12. I'm looking at Trey Tucker, 1 for 3 for a touchdown. So you have Alexander Mattison. He goes out there, 5 for 60, had a 24-yard run, guys. He also had a 17-yard run. Those opened up the end arounds, the sweeps, whatever you want to call them, to these Raiders receivers. And you put both of those together, it's good run after good run. Zamir White went 17 for 50. 17 of those 50 came in one touch, and he also lost a fumble that was returned for a touchdown. Zamir White looked awful in this game. If I'm being honest, he hasn't looked great all year. Yes, the Raiders' offensive line has a lot to do with that, but I personally think it's time to bench Zamir White, and I cannot believe I'm saying that because I was extremely excited coming into this season for White. Josh Jacobs had left in free agency for the Packers, and I'm thinking, well, that's okay. White actually looked better last year. Even when Jacobs was healthy, White still looked more explosive, but that just has not been the case. So I do think that Antonio Pierce should bench White for Mattison. And I do think that the Raiders should continue to get the ball into their receivers' hands on sweeps and on whatever they can do. End around. It doesn't matter because these guys are playmakers and they're explosive. And Brock Bowers, a tight end on a jet sweep for 12 yards, I mean, that's basically unheard of. I mean, tight ends, they might be the best athletes in football. I mean, Brock Bowers is a generational type of player, and that's why the Raiders, even though they drafted a tight end in the second round the year prior, they still took him. And speaking of their tight end the year prior, I'm looking at Michael Mayer. The Raiders in this game were without Divine Diablo, Michael Mayer, Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, Cameron Richardson, Thayer Munford, and Mwaga. I mean, they were without a ton of guys in this game, and they also had a couple of guys get banged up in this game, and they found a way to win. That's why I say, yeah, it wasn't the prettiest game. It wasn't like the Raiders broke the NFL. I'm sure you guys have seen 100 of those titles on YouTube. I'm not going to title it that because they kind of barely came out of this game with a win. The kicker for the Browns missed an extra point off of that fumble return for a touchdown. And if he had made that, well, the Browns would have been in field goal range, well within field goal range, but they needed a touchdown and they didn't get it on fourth down. So what has me excited about the Raiders, though, and don't get it wrong, don't get me twisted, this was an impressive win because guys stepped up. And let's talk about everyone who stepped up in this game, and then let's talk about guys who underperformed. So guys who stepped up, Trey Tucker. We saw, of course, he had that reverse for a touchdown. He also went 5 for 41 through the air. DJ Turner, we saw have a rushing touchdown, as I mentioned. Alexander Mattison was one of the more impressive players in this game. He converted a huge 3rd and 9 with a long run. 60 yards on 5 carries, so impressive. Maybe the most impressive guys, though, were the rookies. Jackson Powers-Johnson and DJ Glaze. I mean, a healthy Raiders team, they might not even be out there, but the Raiders are not healthy. And the fact that the run game was so impressive with 2 rookies starting and out there in the 5 is just incredibly encouraging moving forward, man, for the Raiders offensive line, which has been a weakness all year. Luke Getsy was one of the biggest winners for his game plan, coming prepared. I said in my last video that he's a solid offensive coordinator, and a lot of you guys got on my ass about it, which is understandably so. The offense hasn't looked that great through the first quarter of the season, but I don't think Luke Getsy was the issue for the Bears. Was he part of the problem? Probably. But the Raiders, their offensive line is not the best. They also have Gardner Minshew at quarterback. They can't run the ball, so how much of that is on Getsy? And he comes up with a game plan. The Raiders, they score touchdowns not through the air. When you win an NFL game without even scoring through the air, that's impressive, man. So give credit to Getsy, man, where it's due. He definitely deserves one of the game balls this week. The biggest losers in this game in general, yet alone on offense, were Zamir White and Kolton Miller. Now, Kolton Miller gave up both of the sacks on Gardner Minshew. In his defense, he was working against Myles Garrett. I mean, is there an offensive lineman in football that can contain Myles Garrett? I don't even think so. But still, we know Miller has now struggled against the top edges in football. It's not just Myles Garrett. That's been a reoccurring theme, unfortunately, for the Raiders, is Miller going one-on-one against some of these top edge rushers. So hopefully he can clean that up because Colton Miller is unbelievably good. I mean, he's a guy who has been one of the best Raiders players consistently year after year now. So, again, he's just got to be better. There's no other way around it. Defensively, I mean, this was probably the most impressive thing about the Raiders in this game was their defense, because the Browns, they marched down the field in their opening drive and they scored a touchdown. They end up kicking a field goal a little bit later on. But the Raiders didn't give up much the rest of the game. I mean, Cleveland scored 6 points in the fourth quarter, but I mean, that means 6 points through the next 3 quarters. That's resiliency right there. That's very, very encouraging for the Raiders, guys. The fact that it looked like this was a typical Raiders game where they're going to give up a ton of points and lose, but they didn't. So I'm happy about that, man. Credit to Antonio Pierce. Credit to the defense, Patrick Graham. I just love what I saw. Deshaun Watson only had 176 yards. Did have a touchdown, had 1 pick. He nearly had, it was an 82, 86-yard touchdown pass to Amari Cooper, but there was a hold that went against Christian Wilkins. And that brings me to my next point, is Christian Wilkins. Charles Snowden, who ended up starting over Max Crosby, played well. Had that play, game-saving play against the Browns, and Watson, the sack late in this fourth quarter that won them the game. I'm looking at some other players up front as well that showed up, man, and played their asses off. And Adam Butler made several key stops as well. No Max Crosby, the defensive front to play like this, man, it makes me very, very happy. I'm proud of the Raiders, man, if I'm being honest. Morig had a very good game. Polamalu had a very good game. Jack Jones was definitely one of the biggest losers in this game. He did end up playing, even though he started off the bench, but a business decision. He missed, not even missing tackles, but not even wanting to tackle in the last game against the Panthers, and that showed up on the tape. So that just can't happen. It's inexcusable. In terms of injuries, Jacorian Bennett was banged up with an apparent arm injury in the third quarter and had to be helped off the field for the Raiders, who were missing 5 starters to begin the game. Tyreek McAllister went to the locker room in the fourth quarter with a shoulder issue. Guard Dylan Parham was shaken up in the fourth quarter with an Achilles issue. So that's going to be it for the injuries as of now, at the time of me recording this video. What's next for the Raiders? They're going to be taking on, let's see, guys. Where's the schedule? Why is the schedule not here? There we go. Denver. At Denver on Sunday, October 6th. The Denver Broncos are coming off a big win against the Jets. I haven't not watched that game yet. I will be later on, today. But Broncos, I mean, they've been solid. I like Bo Nix, but they don't have the best roster in the world. The Raiders have got to win that game. Versus Pittsburgh at home, at Los Angeles against the Rams, versus Kansas City at Cincinnati bye week. I mean, if the Raiders, if they can win 2 of their next 3 games, I'll take it. Basically, how I look at it for the Raiders: Broncos, Steelers, and Rams. Can I get 2 of those 3? Kansas City, Cincinnati. Can I get 1 of those games? Bye week. Miami, Denver, Kansas City. 2 of 3. Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Jacksonville, New Orleans, Chargers. Of those 5 games, I've got to have 3 of them. They can win 3 of their next 5. That would actually put them at what, 10-7? 10-7. Yeah, I mean, if the Raiders, that's exactly where I had the Raiders, 10-7 wild card. So yeah, I mean, exactly. Peace.